Australia will partner with the US and UK to develop hypersonic missiles as part of the AUKUS Pact. The missiles can travel 5 times faster than the speed of sound, and Russia claims to have used them during its invasion of Ukraine. For more, we're joined by retired Army General Mick Ryan in Brisbane. Mick Ryan, thank you so much for your time. How significant is this development, and how much of a factor would the conflict in Ukraine have played in this decision?
Hi, Karina. Well, Ukraine has woken a lot of people up to the fact that in the 21st century, there are certain authoritarian regimes who are still happy to go to war to get what they want, unlike the democratic system that we belong to. Hypersonic missiles are already possessed by China and the Russians, and it's important that we have this capability not just to use hypersonic weapons, but to defend against them.
The timeline is important here, isn't it? Because unlike the nuclear submarines we've signed up to under AUKUS, these missiles we could have in Australia in 2 to 5 years. The submarines, that's like a decades-long prospect. How important is that to combat any threat in the region, that quick time frame?
Well, these hypersonic missiles will form part of Australia's national deterrent. The Defence Strategic Update in 2020 was quite explicit about thinking new and getting new capabilities for our country that could complicate the calculus of potential adversaries to make their job more complicated and indeed deter them from threatening or coercing our nation.
Let's discuss the conflict in Ukraine. We've seen Russian forces retreat from near the capital, Kyiv, and the horrific scenes they've left in their wake. Do you agree with Ukraine's president these are the worst war crimes seen since World War II?
Well, they're certainly probably as bad as what we saw in Yugoslavia. And in the wake of Yugoslavia in 1998, the International Criminal Court was established under the Rome Statute to deal with these kind of crimes. So these are appalling, horrific actions that appear to be systemic, not one-offs, by the Russian military, rolling out the same playbook from Syria and Chechnya, but at greater scale and for the whole world to see.
How do you assess the Russian retreat? Is this buying time for a greater spring offensive on the capital, or will they focus militarily on areas further east and south?
Well, the Ukrainians have beaten the Russians in the north. The Russians aren't withdrawing because it was their choice. They conducted an appallingly organised and supported and badly led campaign in the north, and the Ukrainians outfought them and outthought them, to be quite frank. So they've been beaten in the north. It's very unlikely they'll muster the strength to have another go at Kyiv. It's more likely they'll focus in the east and in the south for some kind of success that they can call a victory.
And so what sort of resources does Ukraine have now to combat Russian forces in those areas?
Well, the reality is most of the best brigades in the Ukrainian army have been in the east all along. Some were deployed to the north, but it's where Ukraine traditionally sends its best military forces. They've been fighting hard, really hard over the last 6 weeks to hold the Russians in the east. The Ukrainians will probably deploy additional forces and lots of this Western aid that we see coming in to try and fight the Russians to a standstill in the east as well.
On the diplomatic front, the US and EU are looking at more sanctions on Russia. How much further can they go?
Well, there's probably a lot of economists that could speak in more detail about that, but these are really important, these economic measures as well as the diplomatic and informational measures to complement what's happening on the ground. Every little bit of support to Ukraine helps. And if we can integrate a range of strategic measures across economies and across diplomatic measures, these are all a good thing and they all help Ukraine.
Last week we had that direct request from Volodymyr Zelensky for Australian Bushmasters, which the Australian government has said yes to. Do you anticipate that there could be more requests for lethal aid from Australia?
Well, I don't see why the Ukrainians wouldn't ask for more lethal aid, and there's no reason why we couldn't throw into the pot like a lot of other Western nations, are things like Javelin missiles. We have Javelin missiles. They are a very fine missile, as we've seen against the Russian tanks and armoured vehicles in Ukraine. But the Bushmasters too, as an Australian designed and built vehicle, are magnificent. I've used them in Afghanistan and at home, and they've saved a lot of Australian lives. They all save Ukrainian lives too.
Mick Ryan, always good to talk to you. Thanks for your analysis.
Thanks, Corinne.